As quiet as a mouse, Japan has just unleashed one of its most innovative technologies. But that tech isn't being deployed in Japan itself. It's inside Ukraine, and it's busy making Putin's surprise aerial strikes absolutely powerless. What Japan just did for Ukraine is insane, as it has delivered a devastating blow to Russia without firing a single shot. Japan didn't need to. What it has delivered is the product of an alliance with Ukraine that Putin never saw coming. As the skies over Ukraine are polluted with larger swarms of Russian Shahid-type drones than ever before, a partnership has emerged between a major Japanese company and one of Ukraine's many drone development businesses. Founded about 10 years ago, Terra A1 Corporation is one of the largest tech companies in Japan, with 650 employees and a listing on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. It's a growing enterprise that has announced its entry into the defense sector and, crucially, makes about 60% of its revenue from alliances that it has built outside of Japan. That's where Ukraine comes into play. Deep in the frontline city of Kharkiv is a company named Amazing Drones. Couldn't be more different than Terra A1 Corporation in terms of how it was created. Where Terra was a business born from a desire to profit, Amazing Drones was created from the fires of a war that Ukraine never wanted to fight. But Amazing Drones has grown. What was a volunteer initiative 3 years ago has developed into a full-fledged company that is a major part of the Brave One defense cluster that Ukraine has set up to encourage its drone manufacturers to think big and create what Ukraine needs to defend itself. Now, Amazing Drones is working directly alongside Terra A1 Corporation, and they have developed a hugely important piece of technology that could put an end to Putin's surprise aerial bombardment strategy. That technology is the Terra A1. An interceptor drone that solves every problem that Ukraine has with Russia's Shahid-type long-range attack drones. Born from a meeting between Amazing Drones founder Maxim Klimenko and Terra A1 founder Toru Tokashiga at a defense exhibition in 2025, the Terra A1 is an absolute beast in anti-drone defense. With a top speed of 300 kilometers or about 186 miles per hour and a range of up to 35 kilometers, which is a little over 20 miles, this interceptor drone offers the speed and range needed to tackle Russia's incoming Shahid drones. It can also cover the full mission cycle for an interception, from initial surveillance to detecting targets and, finally, interception, all within a single 15-minute flight. Don't underestimate the importance of this speed. What the Terra A1 lacks in firepower, as it doesn't carry anything like the sort of warhead you would expect from an attack drone, it more than makes up for that by being 100 kilometers or about 62 miles per hour faster than Russia's typical Shahid-type drone. So this isn't just an interceptor that loiters and then gets into a position for a Shahid to strike it. The Terra A1 can hunt a Shahid down, chasing it in an inescapable drone death dance in the sky until it hits its mark and sends the Russian contraption back to Earth with a bang. Not that these death chases will always be needed. In fact, they may prove remarkably rare. As United 24 Media points out, the Terra A1 is a stealthy drone. With its electric propulsion system, it emits very little noise and practically no heat signature, making it incredibly difficult to detect for a Shahid drone operator back in Russia. In many cases, the only sign that a Terra A1 is coming would be if the interceptor flies in clear view of the cameras set up in a Shahid drone. In most cases, the Terra A1 will loiter, spot a target, and blow it up before the operator even knows it's coming. Oh, and the Terra A1 can operate independently of an operator. It's an intelligent drone that can blow up Russia's Shahids without extensive training, be that of the drone itself or the operator controlling it. And here's where it gets serious: the Terra A1 costs just $2,000 to build. Stick with us and you'll find out why that's so important, but for now, the partnership that has produced this drone is still in the very early stages of development, and scaling is next on the horizon. Terra A1 has already put its money where its mouth is. A $10 million investment has been made to fund the production of Terra A1 drones through one of its subsidiaries. This is capital that provides more benefits for Ukraine than the money itself. Interest rates on Japanese capital are around 2%, while those in Ukraine itself hover around 20%. What we see here is an investment of cheaper cash than Amazing Drones could get in its own country, and that money is going to be used to build more Terra A1s than Russia can handle. Right now, production is relatively slow. A single worker can put together 2 Terra A1s per day, and it's unknown how many workers Amazing Drones has in its workshops. But processes are being streamlined, money is pouring in, and very soon the Terra A1 is going to be manufactured at a scale that could make it one of the most important tools that Ukraine has for defending its skies and its people against the scourge of Russia's Shahids. That scaling will have to take place under fire, and Tokashiga knows that the traditional sort of factory isn't the answer. Such factories become targets, but as the Terra A1 founder says, Ukrainian engineers already have practical know-how, how to decentralize production and operate under constant threat. We are studying and considering this approach as well. What we see in that seemingly innocuous statement is that it's far from a one-way partnership. Ukraine is getting new interceptor drones, but Japan is getting knowledge and experience that is combat-tested and very much needed in a world that is increasingly plunging into chaos. Terra A1 is already considering launching the production of Ukrainian drones on Japanese soil. There, they can be built both to benefit Japan and potentially to be sent to Ukraine for use against Putin's forces. What we're seeing here is as important as the Terra A1 itself, as Ukraine is forging a relationship with a major Japanese company that is spilling over into a wider relationship with Japan itself. We've seen inklings of this happening already. Japan has been a constant supporter of Ukraine in its war against Russia, though predominantly on the humanitarian side. In February, Japan pledged $3.8 million to help Ukraine repair some of its cultural sites that had been damaged during the war. Another $1.3 billion had been pledged to Ukraine under the Japanese Peace in Ukraine project as of April 1st. And also in February, the UN announced that the United Nations Industrial Development Organization has concluded a series of grant agreements with 47 Japanese companies that will start testing their business models and technologies inside Ukraine. These are signs of a burgeoning relationship between two powerful nations. The alliance between Amazing Drones and Terra A1 is just one of many examples, and there's more. In March, the governments of Ukraine and Japan began preparing an intergovernmental partnership that facilitates the transfer of defense equipment and technologies. The idea is to help the two countries participate in more joint production, which in turn will lead to localization projects focused on weapons. Already, Japan is looking into purchasing Ukrainian attack drones, which could become a key part of its offensive arsenal if tensions erupt in the Indo-Pacific. For Ukraine, partnerships like these ensure a regular influx of weapons and money, both of which it can use to defend itself against Russia. Ukraine is becoming a major player in a global geopolitical context, and none of this would be happening if Putin hadn't made the dumb decision over 4 years ago to launch a full-scale invasion of a country that he thought would crumble in days. Ukraine stood firm. It's been doing that for over 4 years. And the irony is that all that Putin has succeeded in doing in Ukraine is creating an even stronger country that has developed ties with allies that would never have existed if Putin had just stayed put. But we'll come back to that topic later. Before we do, and before we cover why Terra A1 is going to be important for Ukraine directly, this is a quick reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you're getting value from the insight in this video, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Now, why is the Terra A1 such a huge boon for Ukraine? The answer lies in Russia's aerial tactics. Since it got its hands on Shahid technology, Russia has been engaged in the economics of exhaustion against Ukraine. In other words, it's been launching swarms of drones at Ukraine in ever-increasing numbers, all with the aim of burning Ukrainian infrastructure, cities and people to the ground. The numbers are horrific, though Ukraine is finally at the point where it's able to match Russia blow for blow on the long-range front. In March alone, Russia fired off 6,462 drones at Ukraine. For the first time since the war began, Ukraine has exceeded Russia's monthly total, launching 7,347 long-range drones of its own. But this is new ground for Ukraine. Launching multiple thousands of drones in a month is well-trodden ground for Russia, and it's been causing problems on the economic front. For so long, the counter to long-range drone attacks was the use of modern air defense systems, such as the Patriot units that Ukraine has received from the US and other Western allies. The Patriot is a very important system for Ukraine. It's vital when it comes to intercepting Russia's ballistic missiles. But as an anti-drone defense system, the Patriot is practically useless. That's nothing to do with the Patriot's capabilities and everything to do with the sheer cost involved in using the Patriot against drones. The Council on Foreign Relations lays the numbers bare. A single Shahid-type drone costs Russia about $35,000 to build. One advanced Patriot missile interceptor sets Ukraine back $4 million. It doesn't take an economics genius to tell you that the Patriot isn't the right weapon for dealing with Russia's drones. If that system had been all that Ukraine had at its disposal in March, for instance, Ukraine would have had to spend over $25.8 billion to achieve a 100% interception rate. Of course, that expenditure is ludicrous. But even cheaper air defense systems, such as the Coyote, set the user back $125,000 per shot, the Council points out. Ukraine's big challenge, beyond the damage that Russia's drones cause, has been finding an air defense solution that makes sense on a purely economic scale. It's here where the Terra A1 could prove to be the single most important weapon that has entered Ukraine's arsenal. We told you earlier that a Terra A1 costs $2,000. Assuming a 100% interception rate on Russia's March swarms, that would add up to a little over $12.9 million. Certainly not an insignificant amount of money, but far lower than using systems like the Patriot. Then there's the cost to Russia. If a Shahid-type drone costs $35,000, then 6,462 of them costs over $226 million. Advantage Ukraine. With weapons like the Terra A1, Ukraine goes from scrambling to find enough money to fund its air defense network to knowing that every Russian airstrike is going to cost Putin far more to launch than it will cost Ukraine to overcome. There's also the added benefit that technologies like the Terra A1 allow Ukraine and Japan to point to what the US is doing in Iran right now and say, look, we have something better and cheaper than Patriots that you can use. The US could use something like that. What it's doing in Iran right now is far from efficient. On March 20th, United 24 Media reported on the comments being made by Ukrainian drone specialists who have been deployed to the Middle East to help with Iran's Shahid drones. There, the instructors witnessed the US use up to 8 Patriot interceptor missiles to take out a single aerial threat. In other instances, the US has used SM-6 missiles, which cost about $6 million each, to take out Shahid drones that cost just $70,000. We told you earlier that this sort of approach wouldn't be sustainable for Ukraine. The same is true for the US, even with its enormous military budget. What Japan and Ukraine have just done together could be something that helps both to build stronger ties with the US. But let's come back to interceptor drones for a moment. Those who've been paying attention to Ukraine's approach to air defense during the past few months will know that the concept of interceptor drones is nothing new. Ukraine has been using these kinds of drones for months, and they have proven exceptionally effective. Pravda reported on how effective these types of drones have become for Ukraine in a March 3rd piece, where it revealed that interceptor drones took down 70% of the Shahid-type attack drones that Moscow launched at Kyiv during February. Across all of Ukraine, interceptors are responsible for taking down 30% of Russia's attack drones. The commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, highlighted the difference these types of drones have made to Ukraine, stating, "Despite significantly deteriorating weather conditions and a shortage of strike capabilities, in February we did not allow the performance of small air defense to decline. Last month our interceptor drones carried out around 6,300 sorties, destroying more than 1,500 Russian UAVs of various types." Bear in mind that this technology is still fairly new, but Ukraine has been jumping on it. The National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine says that 2026 has already seen Ukraine increase its internal production of interceptor drones by 8 times compared to 2025. Now, more than 20 Ukrainian companies are working in this field, and the drones that Ukraine is producing have a mission success rate that exceeds 60%. That doesn't seem to be the case based on Syrsky's numbers, though the council may be referring to total interceptor deployments rather than a direct comparison between interceptors used and Shahids destroyed. Regardless, it's clear that interceptor drones are a major technology that Ukraine is leaning heavily into developing further. What we're seeing in the Ukrainian skies right now represents the early stages of that technology's development. The Terra A1 is the next evolution. Fast, autonomous, cheap, and built through a partnership with a Japanese company that opens the door for so much more for Ukraine. And soon, part of a multi-layered air defense shield that defends against Shahid-type drones at close range while other systems deal with Russia's missiles. There are broader implications of all of this, and we've touched on them earlier in the video. What we're seeing with this new partnership is another example of how Putin has achieved the precise opposite of what he wanted to do when he launched his so-called special military operation in Ukraine. That operation was supposed to wipe Ukraine off the map, but what has happened after 4 years of fighting is that Putin's war has made Ukraine stronger, geopolitically speaking, than it has ever been before. The strengthened partnership between Ukraine and Japan is just one example. Both see the mutual benefits of forming defense ties that couldn't have existed before Putin's invasion forced Ukraine into becoming the world's foremost innovator in the drone space. We're seeing similar types of relationships being formed between Ukraine and partners all over the world. In the Middle East, Ukraine has signed decade-long defense deals with several Gulf countries that are looking for ways to combat the Iranian Shahid drones that are the basis for the drones that Russia fires into Ukraine. Ukraine's accession to the European Union is touted by some to be happening as soon as 2027. And that will only strengthen Ukraine's ties with a bloc that has already been as stalwart a contributor to Ukraine's defense as they come. Ukraine's drones have made much of this possible. The likes of Saudi Arabia and Qatar would never have even considered partnering with Ukraine on defense matters in the past. They wouldn't have felt the need to. The same goes for Japan. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has already declared that Ukraine is ready to share its marine drone and interceptor technologies with Japan as far back as February, and the Terra A1 may well be a product of that sharing. All these nations had modern military tech, either built internally or provided by partners like the US, but now Ukraine is key to all of their plans. In a weird and roundabout way, Putin is the reason for that. His war has made Ukraine stronger on the geopolitical stage, and that strengthening has come at a time when Russia's global influence is weaker than it has been for a long time under Putin. In 2026 alone, Putin watched as Venezuela's former dictator, Nicolas Maduro, was taken out of the picture. That's one ally down. The chaos in Iran has cost Russia another ally in Ali Khamenei, though we still have to wait to see if Operation Epic Fury delivers on regime change that would cripple Russia's influence in the Gulf, right when Ukraine's position in that region is at the strongest that it's ever been. Russia isn't even being trusted for its weapons anymore, as it burns through its equipment stockpiles in Ukraine, proving with every passing day that its weapons aren't what they were marketed to be. More of its former buyers are turning to other suppliers. Russia's arms exports have fallen 64% in the last 5 years, the Moscow Times reported on March 9th. That isn't just down to Russia needing more of the weapons it produces. Customers like India and China are buying less. As this is happening, European Union countries, of which Ukraine may soon be one, are selling 4 times as many weapons as Russia. So Japan's Terra A1 is going to be huge for Ukraine in the direct sense. A new type of interceptor drone is more than welcome for a country that is increasingly relying on these cost-effective weapons to tackle Russia's long-range assaults. But it's the broader implications that should worry Putin. With this deal, Japan and Ukraine are closer than ever on the defense front. The same can be said of Ukraine and many other countries. Putin can only watch as Russia's influence crumbles and Ukraine's grows. Every intercepted Shahid will hammer that reality into the Kremlin's head, and every Terra A1 that takes flight reminds Putin that Japan is on Ukraine's side. But maybe Putin won't be paying as much attention to Ukraine's and Japan's new interceptor drones as he should. Russia's war machine is already struggling because Ukraine has been tearing it apart at its source. Ukraine is cutting through Russia's front lines like a knife through butter, and interceptor drones are just one part of a much larger equation that amounts to Russia's doom. Check out our video if you want to learn more, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you're subscribed to The Military Show to see more of our coverage of the Ukraine war, and thank you for watching.